The gavel came down like a rifle shot. Colonel James Garrett sat at the head of the long table. Behind him, three flags: American, Marine Corps, Navy, three men in dress uniforms on one side, Staff Sergeant Derek Kane, Corporal Luis Martinez, Corporal Tyler Hayes. On the other side, a woman, small, auburn hair, green eyes that hadn't blinked in 3 minutes, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Harper, and on her chest something that made Kane's face drain of color. The golden trident. Garrett's voice cut through the silence. Staff Sergeant Kane, you will stand. Kane stood, slowly. You will salute Lieutenant Commander Harper. The room froze. Kane's hand began to rise. This is how it ended. But 3 weeks earlier, nobody knew the quiet Navy chief was a ghost from the teams. This is that story. Forward Operating Base Ironclad sits in the heart of the Yuma Proving Ground, 40 miles of Arizona desert, where the sun doesn't forgive and the sand gets into everything. This isn't just another training facility. This is where Marine units learned desert warfare before Kuwait in 1991, where SEALs tested experimental equipment before Mogadishu, where the ghosts of old wars still walk the firing ranges at dawn. In 2024, it serves as an advanced combat training center. High-tech systems married to old-school tactics. The kind of place where traditions die hard and reputations are built on what you can do, not what you say you can do. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Harper arrived on a Tuesday in September. She came in on a CH-47 Chinook that landed in a cloud of dust thick enough to choke on. When the ramp dropped, she was the last one off, a single duffel bag over her shoulder, tablet case under one arm, moving with a kind of economy that made people look twice without quite knowing why. The base logistics officer checked her orders: Navy loan program, 6-month rotation, electronic warfare specialist, here to install and integrate a new AI-enhanced SIGINT grid that would link satellite feeds, drone relays, and ground units into a single living network. Translation for the non-technical. She was here to make sure the radios worked when they absolutely had to work. The logistics officer, a Marine captain with 2 tours in Helmand Province, glanced from the orders to Rachel and back again. Something in the way she stood didn't match the paperwork. Too still, too aware of the space around her. Welcome to Ironclad, ma'am. Sergeant will show you to your quarters. Rachel nodded once. Didn't smile, didn't make small talk. Just followed the sergeant through the warren of temporary buildings and permanent structures that made up the base. If you had been watching her walk, you might have noticed something. The way she moved wasn't stiff or nervous. It was measured, deliberate. Each footstep placed exactly where it needed to be, no wasted motion, no excess energy. Her shoulders stayed level, her head on a swivel but subtly scanning without seeming to scan. A civilian might have missed it. A combat veteran wouldn't have. Rachel's quarters matched every other junior officer's space on base. Narrow bed with a thin mattress, metal wall locker, small desk bolted to the floor, a single window with a view of the motor pool. The walls were cinder block, painted the same institutional beige that covered half the military installations in the world. She unpacked in less than 10 minutes. 2 spare uniforms went into the locker, pressed and hung with exactly 2 fingers of space between them. Boots lined up heel to heel underneath. Toiletries arranged by height in the small bathroom. Tablet and encrypted laptop on the desk, power cables coiled with precision. On the nightstand, she placed 2 items. The first was a faded paracord bracelet, the kind that gets worn down by salt water and time until the color bleeds out and the weave loosens. It had been forest green once. Now it was the color of old smoke. The second was a folded cloth patch, small enough to fit in a closed fist. She didn't unfold it, just set it down and looked at it for 5 seconds. Then she changed into PT gear and left. The combat dive facility sat on the north edge of the base, a low concrete building with red-tinted windows and a chlorine smell that hit you 50 yards out. Most days it stayed empty except for the occasional Marine combat engineer keeping certifications current. Rachel pushed through the door at 05:30 hours when the sky was still that deep purple that comes just before real dawn. A staff sergeant sat in the control booth, a coffee mug in one hand and a paperback in the other. He glanced up when she entered. Pool's open, ma'am. Just sign in. Rachel signed the log, grabbed a towel from the stack, walked to the edge of the 25-meter pool. The water was cold, deliberately so. Cold water training, cold water tolerance. Cold water calm. She dropped in without hesitation. No splash, no noise, just a smooth entry that barely disturbed the surface. The staff sergeant went back to his book at first. Then he noticed she wasn't swimming laps. She was descending. Straight to the bottom, 10 feet down, where she folded her legs beneath her and went perfectly still. Cross-legged, hands resting on her thighs, head tilted slightly upward toward the surface. The staff sergeant checked his watch. 1 minute, 2 minutes. She didn't move. Small bubbles rose from her nose in a slow, controlled rhythm. Not panic breathing, not even elevated breathing. Just measured exhalations like she had all the time in the world. 3 minutes. 4. The staff sergeant stood up, walked to the glass, wiped the condensation with his sleeve and leaned close. She was still down there, motionless, serene, like a statue at the bottom of a forgotten temple. 5 minutes. 6. His hand moved toward the emergency alarm. 7 minutes. Then she moved. Not a frantic scramble for air, just a smooth, controlled ascent. She rose through the water like smoke rising through still air, breaking the surface with barely a ripple. One breath, calm, controlled. She swam to the edge, pulled herself out in a single fluid motion, and walked to the towel rack. The staff sergeant stood frozen at the glass. "Who the hell taught her to do that?" he muttered to nobody. Rachel dried off, signed out, left without a word. Behind her, the staff sergeant pulled out his phone and started typing a message to someone he trusted. Someone who had been around long enough to recognize what he'd just seen. Because what he'd just seen wasn't recreational swimming. That was combat dive conditioning. The kind taught at a very specific facility in Coronado, California. The kind that took years to master. The kind that kept you alive when you had to swim through flooded tunnels in the dark with a wounded teammate and 400 meters of hell between you and extraction. The signals bay became Rachel's second home. It was a long room filled with equipment, racks, monitors glowing in the perpetual twilight of drawn shades and LED displays. Maps covered one wall, frequency allocation charts covered another. In the center, a horseshoe of workstations where technicians monitored communications across multiple bands. Rachel worked at the corner station, away from the main traffic flow, where she could see both doors and keep her back to solid wall. Old habits. She pulled long hours, not because the work demanded it, though it did, but because focus kept other things at bay, kept the memories in their boxes where they belonged. The SIGINT integration was complex. Linking satellite downlinks to drone relay nodes to ground unit radios required accounting for interference patterns, atmospheric conditions, terrain masking, and a dozen other variables that could turn a clear signal into static at the worst possible moment. Rachel saw it all like a three-dimensional map in her mind. Frequencies stacking and weaving, dead zones shifting with the sun, enemy jamming attempts probing for weaknesses. She adjusted gains, shifted bands, rerouted traffic through alternate nodes, and she documented everything. Not in official reports, those came later, but in her personal encrypted log. Times, observations, system responses, the kind of meticulous record-keeping that separated amateurs from professionals. One afternoon, she was troubleshooting an interference pattern near the motor pool when a young specialist walked past carrying a toolbox. Too fast, too focused on wherever he was going. He didn't see her standing by the equipment rack, bumped into her shoulder with enough force to knock most people back a step. Rachel didn't stumble. She pivoted. A smooth, minimal rotation that let his momentum wash past her instead of through her. Her center of gravity never shifted. Her feet never moved more than an inch. The specialist spun around, startled. "Ma'am, sorry I didn't." "No harm done," Rachel said, voice calm, even. He hurried off. But another technician had been watching. An older Marine, maybe 45, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent 20 years in hard places. He was holding a cable tester, but his eyes were on Rachel. He'd seen how she moved. That wasn't a lucky reaction. That was trained response. The kind that comes from thousands of hours of close-quarters combat drills. From learning how to read incoming vectors and redirect force instead of absorbing it. He didn't say anything, just filed it away. Another piece of a puzzle nobody realized they were solving. The old equipment locker sat in a forgotten corner of the supply warehouse. Most Marines avoided it because it was full of outdated gear. Cold War-era encryption devices. Equipment that belonged in museums, but somehow never made it there. Rachel found it on her third day. She'd been tracking down a persistent signal anomaly and needed to test whether newer systems were backward compatible with legacy frequencies. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. The supply sergeant was a grizzled Marine with gray in his beard and a limp from Fallujah. He unlocked the cage without comment and waved her in. Rachel moved through the shelves like someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. ANPRC 77 radios, the legendary Prick 77, portable, reliable, used in every American conflict from war through Desert Storm. Heavy as a brick and twice as tough. She pulled one down, checked the battery compartment, ran her fingers over the frequency dial with something close to reverence. The supply sergeant watched from the doorway. "That's a museum piece, ma'am. We keep them for training scenarios. Old school comms when everything else fails." "I know," Rachel said, still looking at the radio. "You trained on these?" "My instructor made us master them before we touched anything modern. Said if you couldn't work a Prick 77 in the dark with wet hands, you couldn't work anything." The sergeant's eyebrows went up. "Who taught you that?" Rachel looked up, met his eyes. "A man who learned it in Beirut." Silence. The sergeant knew Beirut. 1983. Marine barracks bombing. 241 dead. The kind of event that defined a generation of warriors. Anyone who served in Beirut and lived didn't teach recreational skills. They taught survival. "Your instructor's still around?" the sergeant asked carefully. Rachel set the radio down gently, like it was something sacred. "No, he's not." She signed out a radio for testing purposes, carried it back to the signals bay, set it on her desk next to the modern equipment. That night, alone in the bay, she opened the radio's battery compartment and found something scratched into the metal housing. Letters, carved with a knife blade or screwdriver. DM, ST2, BRT, 83, David Morrison, SEAL Team 2, Beirut, 1983. Rachel's finger traced the letters. Bull Morrison. Master Chief David Bull Morrison, who'd survived Beirut and Panama and Desert Storm. Who'd trained a generation of SEALs in the old ways before the new technology made everyone think the old ways didn't matter. Who'd trained her. Who'd died in Kandahar, making sure his team got out. Rachel closed the compartment, set the radio aside, went back to work. But something had shifted behind her eyes. The dining facility at Ironclad ran on a simple system. You got in line, you got your food, you ate, you left. No assigned seating, no social hierarchies, just fuel for the machine. Rachel always sat in the back corner, away from the main flow of traffic, where she could see the entrance and the exits without turning her head. More old habits. She ate quickly, not rushed, but efficient. Eyes on her tablet reviewing frequency, allocation maps while mechanically consuming protein and carbohydrates. Most days people left her alone. Most days. Day 4 was different. The doors banged open at 18:30 hours. 3 Marines walked in like they owned the place. Staff Sergeant Derek Kane led the way. 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle and ego, Force Recon tab on his shoulder, combat action ribbon on his chest. The kind of man who'd done hard things in hard places and wanted everyone to remember it. Behind him, Corporal Luis Martinez and Corporal Tyler Hayes. Smaller, younger, followers. Their voices carried before they even reached the serving line. "Telling you, man, that AO was hot. We had eyes on at least 15 combatants." Kane called it. Textbook ambush setup. Loud, confident, alpha. Rachel didn't look up. Kane got his tray, scanned the room. His eyes landed on Rachel. Something flickered across his face, hard to read. Not quite contempt, not quite curiosity. Something darker. He walked toward her table. Martinez and Hayes exchanged glances but followed. Kane stopped 3 feet from Rachel's table, stood there, waiting for her to acknowledge him. She didn't, just kept eating, eyes on her tablet. "Excuse me," Kane said, voice loud enough to carry. "Ma'am." The emphasis on that last word was subtle but unmistakable. Mocking. Rachel looked up slowly, calm, expression neutral. "Can I help you, Staff Sergeant?" Just wanted to welcome you to Ironclad. See how you're settling in. Navy, right? He glanced at her rank insignia. Lieutenant Commander, that's what 04 pretty high rank for, what's your rate again? Electronic Warfare Officer. Right, tech support. He smiled, not friendly. Well, if you need anything radio adjustments, computer helps someone to reboot your router, just let one of the real operators know. Behind him, Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Hayes grinned. Rachel set down her fork, looked at Kane directly. I'll keep that in mind. She went back to her tablet. Kane stood there for another 5 seconds, waiting for more reaction. Waiting for anger, embarrassment, anything he could leverage. He got nothing. Finally, he walked away. But something had been established. Lines had been drawn. A game had started that only one of them knew they were playing. The rumors started small. Like all rumors on military bases, they spread through unofficial channels. The smoke pit, the gym, the late-night guard post where bored Marines traded gossip like currency. Heard the new Navy chief came from Coronado. Bullshit. Coronado's Bud S. SEAL training. She's a comm tech. I'm just saying what I heard. Well, SEALs don't send techs to train Army bases. This is a Marine base. Whatever. Point is, she's not one of them. Look at her. 5 foot nothing, quiet as a mouse. Probably never fired a rifle outside a qualification range. But other observations trickled in. The staff sergeant from the pool mentioned the 8-minute breath hold to a friend. The friend mentioned it to someone else. The details changed with each telling, but the core remained, she could stay underwater longer than seemed humanly possible. The supply sergeant mentioned she knew her way around a prick 77. Mentioned her instructor had served in Beirut. That got people's attention. Beirut was sacred ground. You didn't casually drop Beirut into conversation. The technician who'd watched her pivot around that collision mentioned it in the gym. How she'd moved. How her balance never shifted. None of it proved anything, but together the pieces started forming a shape some people didn't like. Day 8 brought this first real escalation. Rachel was walking through one of the main corridors heading from the signals bay back to her quarters. Tablet under her arm, mind already working through tomorrow's test protocols. The corridor was narrow, concrete walls, exposed pipes overhead, fluorescent lights buzzing with that particular frequency that sits just at the edge of hearing. Kane stepped out from a side passage, not by accident. Martinez and Hayes materialized behind her, blocking the way back. Rachel stopped, didn't speed up, didn't try to squeeze past, just stopped and assessed. 3 men, 1 corridor, limited escape routes. Camera coverage overhead, but probably blind spots in the corners. She ran the tactical calculation in under a second, then dismissed it. This wasn't that kind of fight. Not yet. Chief Harper, Kane said, smiling. Got a minute? I'm on my way to quarters staff sergeant. This won't take long. See, some of the boys and I were talking about your background, your training, and we realized we don't really know anything about you. He stepped closer. So I did some asking around, checked with some buddies at Coronado. Funny thing, nobody there remembers a Rachel Harper going through the teams. His voice carried down the corridor. Other Marines slowed their pace, pretended not to listen while listening intently. So that got me thinking, Kane continued. Maybe you're just another tech who heard some stories. Maybe you want people to think you're something you're not. A SEAL, dropout, a wannabe, someone who couldn't hack it when it got real. Martinez shifted uncomfortably behind Rachel. Hayes watched with nervous anticipation. Rachel's expression didn't change. Are you finished, Staff Sergeant? Oh, I'm just getting started. See, in the real military, the combat military, we have standards. We don't give out tridents like participation trophies. We don't let people play dress up and pretend. Step aside. 2 words. Calm, cold. Kane's smile widened. Or what? Rachel looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she stepped to the side, found the small gap between his shoulder and the wall, adjusted her angle, walked around him without touching him, without showing fear, without rising to the bait. Behind her, Kane's laughter echoed down the corridor. That's what I thought, run along tech support. Go play with your computers. More laughter. Martinez's was hollow. Hayes's was loud and forced. Rachel turned the corner and disappeared. But in her quarters that night, she opened her encrypted log. Time 1945 hours. Location corridor C3. Personnel SSG Kane CPO Martinez Sepla Hayes. Incident verbal harassment. Public accusations of stolen valor. Blocked egress. Multiple witnesses. She logged it with the same precision she logs signal anomalies. No emotion, just data. Because data when compiled correctly became evidence. And evidence when presented correctly became justice. The pattern continued. Day 10 Kane in the operations center. Loud comment about half a soldier, half a software update, while Rachel worked on a comm terminal. Day 12 motor pool. Kane holding court with a group of mechanics. Rachel walking past within earshot. You know what the difference between Desert Storm and now is back then? Warriors were warriors. Guys who humped 90-pound rucks through a rocky sand. Now we got keyboard commandos who think typing counts as combat. Day 15 gym. Rachel doing core work in the corner. Quiet, controlled. Hayes walking past with friends. Careful, boys. That one probably has a whole kill count in a video game somewhere. Each incident logged, each witness noted, each word documented. Rachel said nothing, did nothing, just absorbed it all with that same unnerving calm that made people uncomfortable precisely because it refused to break. But others were watching too. The young Marines who'd laughed at the first insult started laughing less. The jokes felt meaner each time, harder to justify. A supply sergeant stopped chuckling and looked away when Kane made a crack about 5'0" pretenders. A lieutenant in the operations center gave Kane a sharp glance when he interrupted a briefing to mock the Navy's participation trophy program. The current was shifting, slowly, like water eroding stone. Night 17. Rachel was alone in the signals bay. Most of the base had turned in, just her and the night watch in the eternal hum of electronics doing their silent work. She pulled up the base security camera grid. Officially, she was checking interference patterns around the motor pool. Radio frequencies sometimes bled into video feeds, created artifacts, disrupted recording, legitimate troubleshooting. But while she was there, she happened to notice the coverage gaps. Corridor D7, the maintenance wing, where two camera angles should have overlapped but didn't, leaving a blind spot approximately 15 feet long. She noted it in her system log. Then she noted it in her personal log. Then she pulled up her nightly route from the signals bay to her quarters and realized that corridor was on one of the alternate paths, a path she could take if she chose to. Rachel sat back in her chair, steepled her fingers, thought. Master Chief Morrison's voice in her memory. Gravel and wisdom. Never let the enemy choose the terrain echo. Never let them dictate the terms of engagement. If a fight's coming, you pick the time. You pick the place, you stack every advantage you can find. Then you execute. Rachel closed the camera grid, opened her tactical planning file, started mapping. Day 20. The whispers had grown louder. Rachel was in the equipment cage requisitioning replacement antenna cables when two Marines walked past outside. They didn't know she was there. Telling you, man, something's off about her. Off how? The way she moves, the way she breathes. I watched her in the pool yesterday. 8 minutes underwater. 8. That's not normal. Maybe she's just a good swimmer. And the combat reflexes. The way she checks corners, you see how she holds a coffee cup, 3 fingers never wrapping her whole hand around it. That's retention training, in case someone tries to disarm you. You're reading too much into... My uncle was force recon in the 90s. He moved exactly like she does. Said they drilled it into them at the schoolhouse. Economy of motion, threat assessment, always knowing where the exits are. Silence. Then, you think she's actually from the teams? I think Kane picked a fight with the wrong person. They walked away. Rachel emerged from the equipment cage 5 minutes later, signed out her cables, left. But the seeds were planted, and seeds given time grow into forests. Day 22, the final pieces fell into place. Rachel altered her route home from the signals bay, not dramatically, just a small deviation. Instead of taking the main corridor through the admin building, she cut through the maintenance wing. Through corridor D7, the one with the camera blind spot, She walked slowly, deliberately, her footsteps echoing off metal walls. 2100 hours. Most of the base at Chow or in their quarters. The corridor empty, almost empty. She was halfway through when they appeared, Kane at the far end, blocking the forward exit. Martinez and Hayes behind her, blocking retreat, a perfect box. Rachel stopped, adjusted the tablet under her arm, took a slow breath. Kane started walking toward her, confident, predatory. Look who took a wrong turn. Lost chief and need help finding your way. His voice bounced off the walls, amplified in the enclosed space. Rachel didn't answer, just reached up with her right hand, brushed her collar. The gesture looked like nervous habit, adjusting her uniform, but under her fingertips, she felt the tiny vibration. Body-worn camera, concealed under her blouse collar, military grade, voice activated, already transmitting to an encrypted cloud server, recording everything. Kane stepped closer. We've been patient with you, respectful, but you keep walking around here like you're something special, like you earned the right to look down on us. Behind Rachel, Martinez shifted, uncomfortable. Hayes watched with nervous excitement. Kane's shadow fell across her. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize. You're going to admit you're just a tech who got lucky, that you never earned anything. That you're worth, he reached out. Rachel's eyes tracked the movement, fingers extending toward her shoulder, palm open, intent clear. Time seemed to slow. Her muscles coiled like springs waiting for release. But not yet, Morrison's voice again. Let them commit, let them cross the line. No ambiguity, no questions later. Kane's hand kept coming. Rachel's breathing stayed steady. 3 feet, 2 feet, 1 foot. Contact. His palm hit her shoulder. Hard, aggressive, shove. Rachel's body hit the metal wall with a sharp clang that echoed like a gunshot. The body camera caught it all. The audio, the video, the angle, the force. Kane's mistake immortalized in digital data. And then Rachel moved. What happened next took 8 seconds. But those 8 seconds had been built over years. Years of training at a facility in Coronado where they taught you how to turn physics into violence. Where they taught you that size didn't matter if you understood leverage. Where they taught you that calm beats rage. Every single time. Rachel absorbed the impact, didn't resist it, let the force travel through her body and into the wall instead of stopping in her muscles. The moment Kane's weight committed forward, she pivoted. Left foot is the axis point, right foot sweeping back, hips rotating 90 degrees. Her right hand snaked out, found Kane's wrist, not grabbing, guiding. Small joint manipulation. Pressure point between radius and ulna. No strength required, just precision. Kane's center of gravity vanished. His weight overcommitted to the shove suddenly had nothing to push against. His eyes went wide. Surprise. Then pain. Martinez reacted exactly as predicted. Lunged forward, trying to grab Rachel from the left side, trying to help his sergeant. Rachel saw him in her peripheral vision. Had already calculated his approach vector, his speed, his intention. She didn't need to look, just stepped. 4 inches to the right, let his momentum carry him past. Her left hand came up, 2 fingers extended. Target brachial plexus, nerve cluster in the shoulder. Temporary paralysis if struck with correct force at correct angle. 10,000 repetitions on a training dummy. 100 successful applications in live scenarios. One more. Contact. Martinez's arm went dead. Completely. Instantly. He gasped, stumbled, crashed into the equipment rack on the wall. Hayes panicked, rushed in from behind. No skill, no training, just adrenaline and bad decisions. Rachel still had Kane's wrist, still had control of his balance. She pulled, used him like a weight on a lever. 220 pounds of force recon Marine suddenly moving in a direction he didn't choose. Straight into Hayes. Both men tangled, fell, hit the concrete floor hard. 8 seconds. Rachel stood in the center of the corridor, breathing calm, controlled, Kane on his hands and knees, Martinez clutching his useless arm. Hayes dazed and groaning, all three staring up at her. Understanding finally what they'd missed, what the base had missed, what the rumors had been trying to tell them. Rachel adjusted her collar, the body camera still recording. Her voice came out cold as winter. This conversation is over. She stepped past them, walked down the corridor, footsteps measured, unhurried. Behind her, 3 Marines stayed on the ground, stayed silent, stayed broken. Because in 8 seconds, everything had changed. What happened in that corridor would end 3 careers. But to understand why, you need to know where Rachel Harper learned to turn chaos into control. Kandahar 2019, where she lost everything that mattered and learned why SEALs never quit. The sun rose over forward operating base ironclad at 0642 hours, painting the Arizona desert in shades of copper and gold. A new day, the same routines. Marines moving through morning PT. The dining facility coming alive with the clatter of trays and the smell of coffee strong enough to strip paint. But something had shifted in the night. Whispers traveled faster than radio waves. In the smoke pit behind the barracks, 2 privates traded rumors in hushed voices. Heard Kane and his boys got their asses handed to them. By who? That Navy chief, the quiet one. Bullshit, she's like 5 feet tall. I'm telling you what I heard, all 3 of them, less than 10 seconds. The story spread. Details changed with each telling, but the core remained constant. 3 Force Recon Marines walked into a corridor. Only 1 person walked out, and it wasn't any of them. By 800 hours, Commander Robert Phillips had been notified. Navy JAG liaison, 45 years old. Former intelligence officer who'd spent 2 tours in Baghdad doing the kind of work that never made it into official reports. He had a face that gave nothing away and eyes that saw everything. He sat in his small office reviewing security footage on his laptop. The corridor cameras didn't cover the blind spot in D7. That was by design. Budget cuts and bad planning left gaps in coverage throughout the base. But the cameras on either end caught enough. Kane, Martinez, and Hayes entering from different directions. Timing coordinated. Intent clear. Rachel entering alone. Calm. Deliberate. 8 minutes later, Rachel leaving. Same calm, same deliberate pace. 4 minutes after that, Martinez stumbling out, clutching his right arm, face pale. 2 minutes later, Hayes and Kane, both moving stiffly. Kane's expression somewhere between shock and rage. Phillips closed the laptop, opened his encrypted email, found the message that had arrived at 21:37 hours the previous night. Sender LTCDR-R, Harper USN. Subject incident report. Attached body camera footage. Audio transcript. Personal log entries dating back 22 days. Phillips opened the video file. Watched it once. Watched it again. Leaned back in his chair. Well, he said to the empty room, isn't that something? The body camera footage played with perfect clarity, audio first. Footsteps echoing in the corridor. Rachel's breathing steady and controlled. Then Kane's voice. Well, little ghost of Coronado, out past curfew. The camera angle showed what Rachel saw. Kane approaching from the front, Martinez and Hayes visible in peripheral vision blocking the rear exit. Classic herding tactic, box formation, and designed to intimidate, to trap. Rachel's voice calm. Step back, Staff Sergeant. Kane's laugh, mocking. For what you'll file a complaint, run to the shove. Crystal clear on video, Kane's palm striking Rachel's shoulder with enough force to drive her back into the metal wall. The impact sound like a rifle shot in the enclosed space. Then everything accelerated. Phillips had seen combat footage before. Firefights in Fallujah. Close quarters engagements in Ramadi. The chaos of violence compressed into seconds. This wasn't case. This was choreography. Rachel's body absorbed the wall impact. No resistance, just redirection of energy. Her left foot became a pivot point, right foot sweeping back, hips rotating, physics not strength. Her right hand moved with surgical precision. Found Kane's wrist, applied pressure to the specific point between the radius and ulna bones, where nerves cluster close to the surface. Small joint manipulation, a technique developed during World War II, refined through Korea, perfected in the war. Still taught at a specific school in Coronado to a specific type of warrior. Kane's balance vanished. His weight overcommitted to the shove suddenly had nothing to anchor against. The camera caught his face. Surprise, pain, fear. Martinez moved next, lunging from Rachel's left side, his intention clear in his body language. Grab her, restrain her, help Kane. Rachel's response was minimal. A 4-inch sidestep. Martinez's momentum carried him past. Then her left hand came up, 2 fingers extended, 45-degree angle. Target the brachial plexus nerve cluster in the shoulder. Contact. Martinez's entire arm went limp. Dead. Useless. The medical term is neuropraxia, temporary nerve compression causing immediate loss of motor function. It happens in football, in car accidents, in any scenario where sudden force hits the right spot at the right angle, or when someone with 10,000 hours of training applies it deliberately. Martinez's gasp was audible on the recording, pain and shock mixing into a sound that was almost childlike. Hayes came last, panicked, no training evident, just adrenaline and bad decisions. Rachel still controlled Kane's wrist, still controlled his center of gravity. She pulled, used Kane's weight like a pendulum, 220 pounds of muscle moving in a direction he didn't choose. Straight into Hayes, both men crashed, tangled limbs, impact against concrete. Rachel stood center frame, breathing unchanged, posture relaxed. She adjusted her collar, the movement deliberate, making sure the camera stayed visible for a fraction of a second. Proof of recording, proof of intent. Her voice cut through the audio like a blade. This conversation is over. Then she walked away. The camera angle shifted as she moved, caught one last glimpse of 3 Marines on the ground, staring after her with expressions that ranged from shock to something approaching awe. The footage ended. Phillips sat in silence for a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and dialed Colonel Garrett's direct line. "Sir, we need to talk about Lieutenant Commander Harper." "I'm aware," Garrett said. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd already been briefed. "My office, 20 minutes. The line went dead. Phillips looked at the frozen frame on his laptop. Rachel's face in profile. Calm, controlled, professional. "Who are you?" he asked the screen. But he was starting to suspect he already knew. The investigation would take days to unfold. Interviews, evidence review, legal proceedings. But that night alone in her quarters, Rachel sat on her narrow bed and let the memories come. She'd kept them locked away for 5 years, buried under work and routine and the kind of discipline that turns pain into fuel. But the confrontation in the corridor had cracked something open. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. And Rachel's body remembered Kandahar. 2019, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. SEAL Team 3. The compound sat in a valley 20 kilometers from the Pakistani border. Intelligence had identified it 3 days earlier. 2 American contractors kidnapped from a development project in Kabul, held by a Taliban splinter cell that specialized in hostage negotiation. Except this time, negotiations had broken down. The deadline had passed. SEAL Team 3 got the call. Rachel was 29 years old, already 5 years into her career with the teams, trained as a breacher and communications specialist. The person who made sure everyone could talk to everyone else and who could blow a door off its hinges when talking stopped working. Master Chief David Morrison led the team. 53 years old, a legend who'd earned his trident in 1989 right before Panama, served in Desert Storm. Beirut before that as a young Marine before he crossed over to the Navy. Bull Morrison, built like a fire hydrant, voice like gravel in a cement mixer, eyes that had seen every bad thing the world could offer and decided to keep fighting anyway. He'd trained Rachel personally, taken her under his wing when she was a fresh-faced newbie who thought she was tough because she'd survived buds, taught her the difference between surviving training and surviving combat. The night before the Kandahar operation, Morrison gathered the team in the ready room. Rachel, Petty Officer Jake Rivera, 24, the youngest on the team, Tommy Doc Sullivan, 31, their corpsman, 4 others, each specialists in their own right. Morrison's brief was short. 2 hostages, 1 compound, unknown number of hostiles. We go in fast, we go in quiet. We get our people, and we leave. He paused, looked at each of them in turn. Stay liquid, adapt. If it goes sideways, we bring everybody home. Everybody. That last word carried weight. Morrison never left people behind. It was his code, his religion. Everybody comes home. They inserted at 0300 hours. 4 helicopters. Fast rope deployment, half a kilometer from the target. Night vision turning the world into shades of green. The approach was textbook. Silent. Controlled. Each member moving like a shadow among shadows. The compound breach went clean. Explosive charge on the main door. Flashbangs. Entry team flowing through like water. Hostages located in a back room. Zip-tied, blindfolded, terrified but alive. Mission successful. Except wars don't care about mission parameters. The Taliban counterattack came from an unexpected direction, an underground tunnel network that intelligence hadn't mapped. 20 fighters pouring up through hidden entrances. ARPIs and AK-47 fire. The kind of chaos that turns plans into improvisation. Morrison's voice on the radio. Collapse on the hostages, fighting withdrawal to extract point. The team moved, covering each other, leapfrogging back through the compound. Then the RPG hit. Not a direct strike, but close enough. The warhead impacted the compound wall, sending shrapnel and debris cascading through the interior. The building shook, stone and timber collapsing. Rachel was moving through a corridor when the floor gave way. 1 second she was running. The next she was falling. Darkness, impact, cold water. She'd dropped into an underground tunnel, part of the system the Taliban used for smuggling and escape. Now flooded from a recent storm, the water chest deep and rising. She surfaced, gasped. Night vision goggles cracked and useless. Pulled them off. Total darkness. She reached for her rifle. Gone. Lost in the fall. Reached for her sidearm. Still there. Flashlight. Still there. She clicked on the light. The tunnel stretched in both directions. Stone walls, ancient. Water flowing from the north. Rising, a groan behind her. Rachel spun, light beam cutting through darkness. Jake Rivera, slumped against the wall, blood spreading across his left thigh. Shrapnel wound, deep. Echo, he gasped, using her call sign. I can't, my leg. Rachel moved into him, assessed the wound. Bad. Not immediately fatal, but the blood loss would get him eventually. She pulled a tourniquet from her kit, applied it high on his thigh, twisted it tight. Jake screamed, bit it back, breathing hard. Above them, gunfire. Explosions. The sounds of combat muffled by stone and water. Rachel keyed her radio. Static. Too much interference. Too much rock between them and the surface. They were alone. She swept her light around, found the direction of water flow. North, which meant somewhere to the south the tunnel might lead to an exit. Can you walk? She asked Jake. He tried, got his good leg under him, put weight on the wounded leg and collapsed immediately. Negative, he gasped. Echo, you gotta go. Get out. Send help. Rachel looked at him. 24 years old, kid from San Diego, wanted to be a teacher after his service ended, talked about his sister constantly, how she was putting herself through nursing school, how proud he was of her. Morrison's voice in her memory. Everybody comes home. Not happening, Rachel said. She pulled Jake's arm over her shoulder, started dragging him south. The water was up to their waists now, still rising. The tunnels seemed endless, stone walls pressing close. The only light, Rachel's flashlight beam cutting through darkness that felt alive. Every 50 meters, an air pocket. Small spaces where the tunnel ceiling rose above water level, just enough to catch their breath. Jake was fading. Blood loss. Shock. Cold water sapping his body heat. Leave me, he kept saying. Sarah, you gotta go. She didn't bother correcting the name, didn't bother responding, just kept moving. At the third air pocket, Jake stopped breathing. Rachel felt his weight go completely limp, felt the absence of movement in his chest. She pulled him up into the air pocket, laid him on the narrow stone ledge, tilted his head back, started Seeper in pitch darkness, in freezing water, in a tunnel that might not have an exit. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed. Her mind calculated probabilities and came up with numbers she didn't like. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Everybody comes home. Jake coughed, gasped, started breathing again. Rachel pulled him back into the water, kept moving. The tunnel stretched on. Above them, somewhere in the chaos, the team was fighting. Morrison was leading them. Doc Sullivan was patching wounds. The others were holding the line. Below, Rachel was fighting her own war. Against time, against probability, against the cold certainty that Jake might not make it. They were 300 meters in when she saw the light. Faint, green, night vision spectrum. An exit. Rachel's exhausted mind barely registered it, just kept moving. One step, another, 50 meters to go. The water was chest deep now. Rachel could barely keep Jake's head above the surface. 40 meters, voices above, shouting in Pashto. Taliban fighters searching the tunnels. 30 meters. A grenade dropped through a drainage grate overhead. Rachel saw it fall. Had maybe 2 seconds to react. She shoved Jake ahead, turned her body, tried to shield him. The explosion was massive in the confined space. Shrapnel tore through her left shoulder. Hot pain, blood in the water. Jake took hits across his back, his chest. He stopped breathing again. Rachel didn't. She grabbed him, kept moving. 20 meters, 10, 5. The exit was a drainage pipe, barely wide enough for one person. Rachel had to pull Jake through sideways. Morrison was there, on the other side, reaching down. Echo, give him to me. Rachel shoved Jake up. Morrison and Doc Sullivan pulled him through, started CPR immediately. Rachel tried to climb out. Her shoulder wouldn't cooperate. Blood loss, muscle damage. Morrison reached back down, grabbed her good arm, hauled her up with strength that seemed impossible for a man his age. She collapsed on the ground, looked at Jake. Doc Sullivan was working. Compressions, breaths, combat medicine in real time. Jake's eyes were open, looking at Rachel. "Tell my sister," he whispered. "Tell her I tried." Then nothing. Doc Sullivan kept working, kept trying, but some wounds are beyond even the best medicine. Petty Officer Jake Rivera died at 04:47 hours, 24 years old, in a drainage ditch in Kandahar province, 300 meters from the tunnel entrance where he'd fallen. Rachel had carried him the entire way. Morrison pulled her aside. His face was stone, but his eyes held something Rachel had never seen there before. Grief. "You did everything right, Echo," he said quietly. "Everything. The enemy chose this, not you." Then he saluted her. Master Chief David Morrison, legend, mentor, the toughest man Rachel had ever known. Saluting her. She didn't understand it then. Later, Morrison wrote it in his report, recommended her for a Bronze Star, wrote that she'd displayed valor above and beyond. The award got tied up in classification disputes. The mission was sensitive. Details couldn't be made public. Morrison fought the bureaucracy, pushed for recognition. 3 months later, he deployed on another operation. Same region, different compound. The Taliban ambushed them during extract. Heavy fire. Morrison and 2 others were cut off from the helicopters. His last radio transmissions to the team. "Echo Actual, you're clear to extract. Morrison out." He covered their withdrawal, held the line, bought them the seconds they needed. They never recovered his body, but they found his gear, his weapon, his trident. Rachel received them in a sealed box, with a letter Morrison had written before the deployment, to be delivered if he didn't come back. She'd read it once, put it away, never looked at it again, until tonight. Rachel sat on her bed, the letter in her hands, 5 years of dust on the envelope. She opened it, Morrison's handwriting, precise, controlled, like everything about him. "Echo, if you're reading this, I didn't make it back. Don't you dare blame yourself. You did everything right in Kandahar. Rivera's death was the enemy's choice, not yours. I taught you that silence is strength, that discipline beats rage, that the quiet professional is the most dangerous person in the room. You proved it that night. You'll prove it again. Old school warriors like me were fading out, but I know the teams are in good hands because of operators like you. Train the next generation. Pass it on. Huya Echo. Bull." Rachel folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, sat in the darkness of her quarters and felt the weight of 5 years pressing down. Jake Rivera, dead at 24. Bull Morrison, dead at 53. Both gone because they'd chosen to serve, chosen to fight, chosen to protect people who would never know their names. And Rachel alive, carrying their memories, their lessons, their legacy. She stood, walked to her wall locker, pulled out the cloth patch she kept hidden, unfolded it, the Navy SEAL trident, eagle clutching an anchor trident and flintlock pistol, the symbol of warriors who operate in sea, air, and land. Rachel had earned it through blood and water and pain, had worn it through operations most people would never hear about, had hidden it when she transitioned to electronic warfare, when the injuries from Kandahar made her unsuitable for direct combat roles, when she'd chosen the quiet path, the technical path, the path where she could still serve, still contribute, still honor the men who'd died. She looked at the trident for a long time, then she set it on her desk, where anyone who entered could see it. No more hiding. Commander Phillips sat across from Colonel Garrett in the base commander's office. Between them, a laptop displaying Rachel's complete documentation. 47 incidents, logged with timestamps, locations, witnesses, exact quotes. "This isn't defense," Phillips said quietly. "This is surgical evidence collection." She engineered this entire sequence. Garrett nodded slowly. His face gave nothing away. "You knew," Phillips said, "not a question." "I suspected." "And you didn't intervene." Garrett looked at him. The full weight of a career that started in Beirut, continued through Panama, Desert Storm, 2 decades of Middle East operations. "Master Chief Morrison was my friend," Garrett said. "He wrote me a letter before Kandahar, said he'd trained the finest operator he'd ever known, said if anything happened to him, I should watch over her." Phillips waited. "Morrison also said she'd blame herself for Rivera's death, for his death, that she'd carry it like a weight." Garrett paused. "He said the best thing I could do was let her handle her own battles, let her prove to herself what he already knew, that she's capable, that she's exceptional." Phillips looked at the laptop screen, the frozen frame of Rachel walking away from 3 downed Marines. Kane and his men committed assault, multiple witnesses, video evidence. This goes to court-martial, they're finished. "I'm aware, man. What about Harper? What about her, then? Does she want to press charges?" Garrett smiled, thin, knowing. "I don't think Lieutenant Commander Harper wants anything except to do her job. The question is whether the Marine Corps wants to handle this properly." Phillips understood. This wasn't about Rachel. It was about the institution, about standards, about what kind of behavior would be tolerated, about whether 3 Marines who'd harassed, intimidated, and assaulted a Navy officer would face consequences. "I'll start the paperwork," Phillips said. Across the base in a small barracks room, Corporal Luis Martinez sat alone. His right arm still didn't work properly. The corpsman said it would take a few days for the nerve compression to fully resolve, maybe a week. In his left hand, he held his phone. On the screen, an audio file, recorded the night before. In Corridor D7, Martinez had started recording when they'd first cornered Rachel. Not for evidence, just insurance. In case things went wrong. They'd gone wrong, but the recording caught everything. Kane's threatening words, the shove, the sounds of the confrontation. Rachel's calm voice at the end. Martinez had listened to it 5 times. Each time he heard it differently. The first time he'd heard his own voice. Nervous, following orders, being a coward. The second time he'd heard Kane. Aggressive, mocking, crossing lines. The third time he'd heard Rachel. Calm, professional, warning them to back down. The fourth time he'd heard himself breathing. Fast, scared, knowing this was wrong but doing it anyway. The 5th time he'd heard his uncle's voice in his memory. Luis's uncle had served in Desert Storm, Marine artillery, had come home with scars and stories and a code he'd tried to pass on to his nephew. "Honor isn't about loyalty to men," he'd said. "It's loyalty to truth, to what is right. Sometimes you have to stand alone. Sometimes you have to be the one who says no." Martinez had nodded, agreed, promised to live by that code. Then he'd followed Kane into a corridor and helped corner a woman half their size. He stood, walked to his locker, found his dress uniform, put it on with shaking hands, walked across the base to the JAG office. Commander Phillips looked up when Martinez entered. "Corporal, your arm okay?" "It'll heal, sir." Martinez set his phone on the desk. "I have something you need to hear." Phillips listened to the recording once, looked at Martinez. "This corroborates Harper's account." "Yes, sir." "You understand what this means for you, for Kane, for Hayes?" "Yes, sir." "Why are you doing this?" Martinez met his eyes. "Because my uncle taught me better. And because she warned us, gave us every chance to walk away." He paused. "We chose wrong. That's on us." Phillips took the phone, downloaded the file. "You'll be called to testify." "Yes, sir." "Your career is probably over." "I know, sir." Martinez stood, saluted, left. Phillips sat alone in his office. 3 pieces of evidence now. Rachel's documentation, her body camera footage, Martinez's audio recording, an airtight case. He picked up his phone, dialed Garrett. "Sir, we need to schedule a formal hearing. This goes beyond non-judicial punishment." "Agreed," Garrett said. "Tomorrow, 1400 hours, full tribunal." "And Harper?" "She'll be there, so will Kane, Martinez, and Hayes." Phillips hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering him since he'd first seen the footage. "Sir, where did she learn to move like that?" Silence on the line. Then Garrett's voice quiet, almost reverent. "Coronado, SEAL Team 3. She earned her trident in 2016. Served 4 years active combat. Kandahar in 2019 is where she got wounded. Shoulder injury. Ended her direct action career." Jesus. Kane picked a fight with an operator, a real one, the kind Morrison trained personally. "Does Kane know?" "He's about to." The line went dead. Phillips sat back in his chair, thought about Rachel Harper, 5'1", quiet, calm, walking through the base like she had nothing to prove. Because she'd already proven everything that mattered. In dark water, in flooded tunnels, in the kind of hell that forges warriors or breaks them. She hadn't broken. She just learned to carry it quietly. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimony damning. But in military justice, facts are only part of the story. The rest is about honor, about standards, about what kind of warriors we choose to be. Tomorrow, Colonel Garrett would make that choice. And 3 Marines would learn what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. The command conference room had been built in '91, right after Desert Storm. The wood paneling came from old-growth oak donated by a veterans organization. The chairs were solid, designed to last decades. The table stretched 14 feet, polished to a mirror shine by generations of enlisted personnel assigned to maintenance duty. Above the head chair hung 3 flags, the American flag in the center, the Marine Corps colors to the left, the Navy Jack to the right. This room had witnessed courts-martial, promotion boards, investigations into friendly fire incidents and equipment failures, and the 1,000 small tragedies that occur when humans operate in high-stress environments with lethal tools. But in 33 years, it had never witnessed anything quite like this. Colonel James Garrett entered at exactly 13:55 hours. 5 minutes early, his uniform was immaculate. 4 rows of ribbons on his chest. Purple Heart from Beirut, Bronze Star from Panama, Silver Star from Desert Storm, Combat Action Ribbon, Presidential Unit Citation. Others, each ribbon told a story. Each story had cost something. He took his seat at the head of the table, set down a leather portfolio, folded his hands, waited. The others filed in over the next 3 minutes. Commander Phillips, Navy JAG liaison, carrying a thick folder of evidence. Major Sarah Williams, Marine JAG officer assigned to represent the accused. Young, competent, already looking uncomfortable with what she'd read in the preliminary reports. 3 enlisted Marines in dress uniforms, Kane, Martinez, Hayes, each sitting ramrod straight, each face a study in controlled emotion. Kane looked angry, jaw tight, eyes forward, refusing to acknowledge anyone. Martinez looked sick, pale, haunted. Hayes looked terrified, hands shaking slightly until he clasped them together. And then Rachel Harper entered. She wore her dress blues, the uniform she hadn't put on in 5 years. Navy officer's cover tucked under her left arm. Ribbons on her chest. Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Valor device. Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, Afghanistan Campaign Medal, others. And on her left breast above the ribbons, the golden trident, eagle, anchor, pistol, trident, the seal insignia. The room went completely still. Kane's eyes locked on that trident, his face drained of color. Martinez closed his eyes. Hayes made a small sound, almost a whimper, because they understood now. And all the rumors, all the whispers, all the strange observations about how she moved, how she breathed, how she existed in space, like someone trained for violence at the highest level. All true. Rachel took her seat across from the three Marines, set her cover on the table in front of her, folded her hands. Her expression gave nothing away. Garrett checked his watch. Exactly 1,400 hours. This tribunal is convened to investigate allegations of assault, harassment, and conduct unbecoming. All parties have been advised of their rights under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Staff Sergeant Kane, you requested this hearing. You may present your defense. Kane stood, cleared his throat. Sir, yes, sir. Colonel, what happened in Corridor D7 has been misrepresented. My men and I encountered Lieutenant Commander Harper at approximately 2130 hours. We engaged in conversation. Things got heated. She became aggressive, attacked the Corporal Martinez without provocation. We attempted to restrain her for her own safety and the safety of others. She responded with excessive force. He sat down. Garrett didn't react, just looked at Major Williams. Does the defense have anything to add? Williams stood. Sir, my clients maintain that while emotions may have run high, there was no intent to harm or intimidate Lieutenant Commander Harper. Any physical contact was in self-defense or in an attempt to prevent harm. Noted. Garrett turned to Phillips. Commander, present your evidence. Phillips stood, opened his folder. Sir, the prosecution has three primary pieces of evidence. First Lieutenant Commander Harper's personal log documenting 47 separate incidents of harassment over a 22-day period. He slid a printed copy across the table. Garrett picked it up, started reading. The entries were clinical, precise, no emotion, just facts. Day 4, 1830 hours. DFAC. SS Jet Kane made derogatory comments regarding SEAL training implied. Stolen Valor slapped food tray from table. Witnesses approximately 30 personnel. Day 8, 1945 hours. Corridor C3. SSG Kane CPL Martinez. CPL Hayes blocked egress, made accusations of fraudulent service claims. Witnesses 2 junior Marines names recorded. Day 10, 1415 hours. Operations Center. SS Scott Kane made disparaging comments about technical personnel versus combat personnel while I was present. Witnesses. Captain Morrison 4 enlisted personnel. On and on. 47 entries, each one documented, time-stamped, witnessed. Garrett finished reading. Set the log down. Continue. Phillips nodded. Second piece of evidence, body-worn camera footage from the night in question. He opened his laptop, turned it so the screen faced the room, pressed play. The footage showed everything. Rachel's steady footsteps, her controlled breathing. Kane's voice. Well, well, little ghost of Coronado, out past curfew. The box formation, 3 men cornering 1 woman. Rachel's warning, step back, Staff Sergeant. Kane's mocking response, the reach, the shove. Rachel's body hitting the wall with that sharp metallic clang. Then the 8 seconds. The room watched in silence as Rachel dismantled 3 Force Recon Marines with movements so precise they looked choreographed. Each technique visible. Each application of leverage and nerve strikes in weight distribution clear. This wasn't a brawl. This was mastery. The footage ended with Rachel walking away, calm, unhurried. Phillips closed the laptop. Third piece of evidence, audio recording provided by Corporal Martinez. He pressed play on a second device. Martinez's recording played through the room's speakers. Every word, every threat, every mocking comment. Kane's voice especially clear. You're worth nothing, just another tech who got lucky, who never earned anything. The shove clearly audible. Rachel's final statement, this conversation is over. Silence. Phillips sat down. Garrett looked at the 3 Marines. Staff Sergeant Kane, Do you dispute the authenticity of this evidence? Kane's jaw worked. His face was red, but he'd been in the military long enough to know when the fight was lost. No, sir. Corporal Martinez, Corporal Hayes, do you dispute the evidence? No, sir, they said in unison. Garrett nodded slowly, then he turned to Rachel. Lieutenant Commander Harper, do you have anything to add? Rachel stood. Sir, I have nothing to add. The evidence speaks for itself. You documented every incident? Yes, sir. You planned your route through a camera blind spot. I chose a route where I could control the variables, sir. You recorded the confrontation. I ensured there would be no ambiguity about who initiated physical contact, sir. Garrett leaned back in his chair. Lieutenant Commander, where did you learn that level of tactical planning? Rachel's expression didn't change. Sir, I learned it from a man who served in Beirut, Panama in Desert Storm, who taught me that discipline beats rage, that preparation beats improvisation, that professionals control the battlefield, they don't react to it. The room was absolutely silent. Garrett stood, walked to the window, looked out at the desert beyond. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. Master Chief David Morrison. Rachel's composure cracked. Just for a second, a slight widening of the eyes. You knew him, sir, Garrett turned. Bull Morrison was my friend. I was a lieutenant in Beirut when the barracks went up. October 23, 1983, 241 Marines killed. I was in the section that didn't collapse. Bull was Navy EOD, back then attached to our unit. He pulled 3 Marines out of the rubble, under fire, saved my life when a secondary collapse nearly buried us both. He walked back to the table. We stayed in touch. Panama, Desert Storm, the wars on terror. Bull and I deployed to the same theaters more than once. Different units, different missions. But we'd cross paths, share a cup of coffee, trade stories. Garrett pulled a letter from his portfolio. Before Bull's last deployment to Kandahar, he wrote me a letter. Said he'd trained the finest operator he'd ever known. Said if anything happened to him, I should watch over this operator. Make sure the bureaucracy didn't bury them. He set the letter on the table. He wrote that this operator had carried Petty Officer Rivera 400 meters underwater while wounded, under fire. That command wanted to classify it, bury it, that he'd fought to get proper recognition and died before the paperwork cleared. Garrett looked directly at Rachel. He was writing about you. The room held its breath. Sir, Rachel said quietly, Rivera didn't make it. No, he didn't, but he had a chance because you refused to leave him, because you executed a tactical underwater exfiltration that should have been impossible, because you embodied the ethos that Bull Morrison spent 30 years teaching. Garrett picked up the evidence folder. This tribunal is not here to judge whether Lieutenant Commander Harper acted appropriately in Corridor D7. The evidence is clear. She was assaulted. She defended herself with minimal necessary force. She documented everything with professional precision. He looked at Kane. This tribunal is here to determine consequences for 3 Marines who systematically harassed, intimidated, and assaulted a superior officer, who mocked her service, who questioned her valor, who physically attacked her in a location they believed would leave no evidence. His voice hardened. Staff Sergeant Derek Kane, you are hereby reduced in rank to sergeant. You will forfeit 1 month's pay. You will be reassigned from all leadership positions pending a full review board. This reduction is effective immediately. Kane's face went white. Corporal Luis Martinez, Corporal Tyler Hayes, you are both reduced in rank to Lance Corporal. You will forfeit 1 month's pay. You will be reassigned from all leadership positions pending review. Martinez nodded, accepting. Hayes looked like he might be sick. Furthermore, Garrett continued, all 3 of you will submit formal written apologies to Lieutenant Commander Harper. Not because she needs them, but because you need to understand what you did wrong. He paused. This hearing is adjourned. Dismissed. The 3 Marines stood, saluted, turned to leave. Sergeant Kane, Garrett said. One more thing. Kane stopped. Tomorrow morning, 0800 hours, base-wide formation on the parade ground. You will be there, all of you. Sir, you'll see. They left. Only Rachel and Garrett remained. Lieutenant Commander, Garrett said quietly, Bull was right about you. I'm sorry it took this to prove it. Rachel stood, saluted. Thank you, sir, for honoring his memory. That's not me honoring his memory. That's you living it. The word spread through forward operating base ironclad like wildfire through dry brush. Base-wide formation, 0800 hours. Parade ground, mandatory attendance. Nobody knew why, but everyone had theories. In the barracks that night, Marines whispered, it's about that Navy chief. The one who dropped Kane, that's the one. Heard she's actual SEAL team. No shit. Saw her dress blues, full trident, combat ribbons, the real deal. Kane must be shitting himself. Good. Guy's been a dick for years. The sun rose over the desert at 0641 hours. By 0730, Marines and Navy personnel were forming up on the parade ground. Units in ranks, dress uniforms, the kind of formation that only happened for serious occasions. Award ceremonies, courts-martial, command changes. This felt like all three. Rachel stood in the Navy detachment, back row, trying to be invisible despite the trident on her chest that caught the morning sun and seemed to glow. She could feel eyes on her, curiosity, respect, some lingering doubt from those who still couldn't reconcile the quiet tech chief with the warrior she'd proven to be. At exactly 0800 hours, Colonel Garrett marched onto the platform. The entire formation snapped to attention. At ease! Several hundred bodies shifted in unison. Garrett stood with his hands behind his back, looking out over the assembled personnel, taking his time. When he spoke, his voice carried across the parade ground without need for amplification. In this uniform, we uphold certain standards: honor, courage, commitment, respect. These are not abstract concepts. They are the foundation of everything we do. When those standards fail, when the people who wear these ranks betray them, we correct it. Immediately, publicly, completely. A ripple went through the formation. Last night, evidence was presented to this command. Evidence of misconduct, harassment, abuse of authority, and a deliberate attempt to conceal this truth by 3 Marines on this base. All eyes found Kane, Martinez, and Hayes in the front row of the Marine formation. Effective immediately, Staff Sergeant Kane is reduced to Sergeant. Corporal Martinez and Corporal Hayes are reduced to Lance Corporal. All 3 will forfeit 1 month's pay and are reassigned away from leadership roles pending further review. The murmurs were louder now. Shocked. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was career destruction. But that, Garrett continued, is only half of what needs to happen here today. He turned slightly. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Harper, front and center. Rachel's stomach dropped. This wasn't in the plan. Garrett hadn't mentioned this, but orders were orders. She stepped forward from the Navy formation, marched across the parade ground with every eye following her, stopped exactly 2 paces from Garrett, rendered a crisp salute. Garrett returned it with equal precision. Then he faced the formation. On behalf of this base, this command, and the United States Marine Corps, I offer a formal apology to Lieutenant Commander Harper for the misconduct committed against her. The words echoed across the parade ground. She showed restraint when others showed aggression, professionalism when others chose arrogance, strength when others displayed weakness. She upheld the standards we claim to value, while others betrayed them. He turned to Kane. Sergeant Kane, front and center. Kane marched forward, stiff, mechanical, stopped beside Rachel. The humiliation was written across his face, standing next to the woman he'd mocked, the woman he'd called worthless, the woman who'd proven conclusively that she was more of a warrior than he'd ever be. Sergeant Kane, Garrett said, you will salute Lieutenant Commander Harper. For 3 seconds, Kane didn't move, not because he was refusing, but because the weight of that order was crushing. A salute is respect, recognition, acknowledgement of authority and accomplishment. Kane had spent 3 weeks trying to destroy Rachel's credibility. Now he had to publicly acknowledge what he'd tried to deny. His hand rose. Slowly, the movement looked painful, like lifting a weight that was too heavy. But military discipline ran deep. His fingers aligned, his palm cut the air. A perfect salute, executed with the precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, but hollowed out by the humiliation burning behind his eyes. Rachel looked at him, Not with triumph, not with vengeance, just acknowledgement. She lifted her hand, returned the salute with the same calm precision she brought to everything. In that moment, everyone watching understood something. You cannot measure a warrior by size, by volume, by bravado. You measure them by discipline, by character, by what they do when tested. Rachel lowered her hand. Kane lowered his. Garrett's voice carried across the parade ground. Let this stand as a reminder. Strength is not loud. Respect is not optional. And quiet warriors walk among us every day. Dismissed. The formation held for another 3 seconds. Then starting from the back and rolling forward like a wave applause. Not wild, not cheering, just steady, respectful applause. Recognition. Rachel stood at attention, eyes forward. But something in her chest loosened. The weight she'd carried since Kandahar. Since Jake Rivera died in her arms. Since Bull Morrison sacrificed himself for his team. The weight that whispered she wasn't enough. Hadn't done enough. Should have been better. It didn't disappear. But it shifted. Made room for something else. Maybe acceptance. Maybe peace. Rachel returned to the signals bay at 1100 hours. The room looked the same. Equipment racks humming. Monitors glowing. Frequency maps updating in real time. But the atmosphere had changed. When she entered, conversations didn't stop. They softened, heads turned, not with pity or awe, with respect. A young specialist approached, maybe 20 years old, fresh out of technical school. He'd been assigned to the base for 3 weeks and barely spoke to anyone. Ma'am, he said, voice quiet, thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. Rachel nodded, once, gentle. What's your name, specialist? Webb, ma'am, Patrick Webb. Where you from, Webb? Kentucky, ma'am. My dad served. Army, said I should learn a real skill. So here I am. Rachel smiled, small but genuine. Your dad gave you good advice. The skills you learn here, they matter. When bullets are flying and people are scared, you're the one who makes sure everyone can talk to each other. That's not support. That's combat. Webb straightened, nodded, went back to his station with something new in his posture. Commander Phillips appeared at Rachel's desk 10 minutes later. The base is better today because of you, he said quietly. Rachel looked up from her keyboard. Correction was needed, that's all. Phillips studied her for a moment. Morrison trained you well. He trained me to do the job, whatever it takes. The job, Phillips repeated. Is that what you call carrying a wounded teammate 400 meters underwater? Rachel's fingers stopped typing. That was part of the job, sir. Most people would call that heroism. Most people weren't there. Phillips nodded slowly. Well, for what it's worth, the Navy's proud to have you, even if you're spending your time making Marine radios work. He left. Rachel went back to work. Because work was constant. Work was reliable. Work didn't ask questions about guilt or grief, or whether you deserved to be alive when better people were dead. Work just was. That evening, as the sun painted the desert in shades of copper and gold, someone knocked on Rachel's door. She opened it. Private First Class Jason Rivera stood in the hallway, nervous, hands clasped behind his back. Ma'am, sorry to bother you. Can I talk to you for a minute? Rachel stepped aside. Let him in. Rivera looked around the sparse room, the made bed, the organized desk, the paracord bracelet on the nightstand. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for what you did, for showing everyone that respect matters. You're welcome, Private. Rivera shifted, working up courage for something. Can I ask you something, ma'am? Go ahead. Did you really serve with SEAL Team 3? Rachel paused, then nodded. I did. My uncle was Team 3. He died in Kandahar, 2019. I was just a kid, but my family, we were proud of him. Still are. Rachel's chest tightened. What was your uncle's name? Rivera, ma'am. Petty Officer Jake Rivera. The room seemed to contract. Rachel looked at this young Marine, 20 years old, same dark hair as Jake, same brown eyes, same slight build. Jake's nephew. The universe was not kind with its coincidences. Your uncle, Rachel said slowly, was one of the finest men I ever served with. Rivera's eyes widened. You knew him. I did. Nobody in my family really knows what happened, just that he died during an operation. They said it was classified. Rachel walked to her desk. opened a drawer, pulled out a small case. Inside was a coin, a SEAL Team 3 challenge coin. Warren carried it for 5 years. Your uncle gave this to me, she said. Not entirely a lie. Jake had carried it. She'd found it in his gear after. Kept it. He was brave, loyal, never complained, never quit. She handed the coin to Rivera. He'd want you to have this. Rivera took it with shaking hands. Ma'am, I don't know what to say. You don't have to show him anything. Just remember him. Honor his service by being the kind of Marine he'd be proud of. Rivera nodded, blinking back tears. Yes, ma'am, I will. He left. Rachel sat on her bed, looked at the paracord bracelet, Bull Morrison's, worn by Salt and Time, looked at the trident patch now displayed openly on her desk, thought about Jake, about Bull, about all the warriors who'd gone before. The weight was still there, but maybe, just maybe, she was learning to carry it. The next morning, Rachel found Derek Kane in the corridor outside the chow hall. He saw her coming, stiffened, started to turn away. Sergeant Kane, he stopped. Ma'am. They stood 3 feet apart, neither moving closer. I wanted to tell you something, Kane said. Voice rough. I was wrong about everything, about you, about what makes someone a warrior. Rachel waited. I failed SEAL selection twice, Kane continued. Medical disqualification, hearing damage from artillery training. It ate at me, watching others succeed where I failed, watching women succeed where I failed. He looked at her directly. That's not your fault. That's mine. I turned my failure into poison. Aimed it at you. That was wrong. Rachel nodded slowly. My mentor used to say the only failure is not trying. You tried. Twice. That's more than most people ever do. Kane's jaw worked. Doesn't change what I did. No, it doesn't, but it explains it. And maybe that's a start. A start toward what? Toward being the Marine you actually want to be, instead of the one your anger made you. Kane was silent for a long moment, then he nodded, saluted, walked away. Rachel watched him go, wondered if people could really change. Decided it didn't matter. What mattered was giving them the chance. 3 days later, a priority message arrived at Rachel's terminal. Classified. Eyes only. She opened it. Joint Special Operations Command. Request for experienced electronic warfare officer. High-risk operation. Hostile territory. Duration 90 days. Volunteers only. Rachel read it twice. Commander Phillips appeared at her desk. They specifically asked for you, he said. Your reputation precedes you. What kind of operation? The kind I can't talk about, but the kind that needs someone who understands combat communications at the highest level. Rachel looked at the screen, thought about staying here. Safe, technical, away from the sharp end. Thought about Bull Morrison's letter. Train the next generation, pass it on. Thought about Jake Rivera dying in her arms. Thought about the jaw, whatever it takes. When do I leave? She asked. Philip smiled. 72 hours. Forward operating base Ironclad looked the same as always. Desert, heat, Marines training in the distance. But some things had changed. Derek Kane worked in logistics now, supervising supply chains. No longer leading men into the field, but doing the work well. Quietly, learning slowly what real strength looked like. Luis Martinez had been promoted back to corporal, earned it through performance and discipline. He mentored younger Marines now, taught them the difference between loyalty to men and loyalty to truth. Tyler Hayes was gone, transferred to a different base. Some people learned, others just moved on. Private Jason Rivera excelled, top marks in his training rotation. People said he had his uncle's dedication, his uncle's heart. He wore Jake's challenge coin on a chain around his neck. And in the signals bay, a new electronic warfare officer worked at the corner station. Lieutenant Maria Santos, Navy, competent, quiet, trained by Rachel Harper during that 90-day deployment nobody talked about, learning the same lessons Bull Morrison had taught, the same standards, the same code. Rachel herself was gone, back to Coronado, special assignment, training the next generation of SEAL communications specialists, passing on the knowledge, honoring the legacy. In her quarters at Coronado, she kept 3 things on her desk. Bull Morrison's paracord bracelet, the Trident patch, and a photo, SEAL Team 3 2019. 8 warriors in desert camouflage. Rachel on the left, Bull Morrison in the center, Jake Rivera on the right, Tommy Sullivan Doc holding the team medic bag. All of them looking at the camera with the confidence of people who'd done impossible things and would do them again. Half of them were gone now, but the others carried on. Because that's what warriors do. They carry on. They honor the fallen by being worthy of the legacy. They train the next generation. They serve without recognition, fight without fanfare, stand without surrender. They walk quietly, but they never quit. In the teams, they have a saying, "The only easy day was yesterday." Rachel Harper lives that every day, not because she seeks glory, but because somewhere a young warrior named Jason Rivera is learning what his uncle knew. That courage isn't loud, honor isn't optional, and the quiet professionals are always watching. Master Chief Morrison taught her that. She's teaching the next generation. That's how legacies live on, not in monuments, but in the steady hands of those who refuse to quit.